Hello and welcome back. So we had been discussing about the identity theory and functionalism, and we had just about started with J.J.G. Smart. J.J.G. Smart was a towering figure in 20th century philosophy, particularly known for his advocacy of the identity theory in philosophy of mind and his contributions to utilitarian ethics. His work laid the foundation for many contemporary debates in philosophy, and his influence is still felt in discussions about the nature of mind, consciousness, and the relationship between ethics and science. Now we will discuss about Smart's sensations and brain processes from Chalmers' work. J.J.C. Smart's paper Sensations and Brain Processes is a classic defense of the identity theory in philosophy of mind, where he argues that sensations are identical to brain processes. To elucidate these from the perspective of David Chalmers' work, particularly as discussed in pages 60 to 68 of his book The Conscious Mind, we need to juxtapose Smart's physicalist approach with Chalmers' views, especially his arguments regarding consciousness and the heart problem. Identity theory defense. Smart argues that sensations such as feeling, pain, seeing red, and so on are nothing over and above brain processes. When we talk about having a sensation, we are actually referring to a particular physical process in the brain. For example, the sensation of the pain might just be the firing of a certain neurons like C fibers. Nominalism and Occam's razor. Smart supports his theory by appealing to Occam's razor, suggesting that it is more parsimonious to assume that sensations and brain processes are the same thing, rather than postulating a separate non-physical realm of mind or consciousness. According to Smart, dualism, the idea that the mind is separate from the body, is unnecessary and overly complex. Topic neutral language. He also introduces the idea of topic neutral descriptions, arguing that mental states can be described without committing to any specific metaphysical theory. For instance, instead of saying I am in pain, one might say something is happening in me that is like what happens when I stub my toe, which avoids committing to any particular theory about what pain is. Chalmers' critique, the heart problem of consciousness. Chalmers distinguishes between the easy problem of consciousness, which involve explaining cognitive functions and behavior, and the hard problem, which involves explaining subjective experience or qualia. Chalmers argues that while physical processes in the brain can explain how we behave or process information, they do not explain why or how these processes are accompanied by subjective experience. Chalmers' critique further, which has been against the physicalism. On pages 60 to 68 of The Conscious Mind, Chalmers discusses why he believes that purely physical bodies, like Smart's identity theory, cannot fully account for consciousness. He argues that even if we had a complete understanding of the brain's physical processes, there would still be something left unexplained, namely why these processes give rise to subjective experience. Consciousness as a fundamental property. Chalmers suggests that consciousness might be a fundamental feature of the universe, much like space, time, or mass. This implies that no matter how much we learn about brain processes, we might never fully explain consciousness in purely physical terms. The synthesis, comparing Chalmers and David Smart. Smart's materialism. Smart believes that everything about the mind can ultimately be explained in terms of brain processes. He advocates for a reductive physicalism, where mental states are identical to physical states in the brain. Chalmers challenges this view by pointing out that even if mental states correlate with brain states, this correlation does not explain the subjective qualia of experience. He argues that there is a fundamental gap between physical processes and consciousness which Smart's identity theory cannot bridge. Qualia and explanation. While Smart might argue that as science progresses, we will eventually be able to explain qualia in physical terms, Chalmers is skeptical. He believes that physical explanations, no matter how detailed, cannot account for the intrinsic nature of conscious experience. Smart's sensation and brain processes argues for a strict identity between mental states and brain processes, grounding all mental phenomena in the physical. Chalmers, however, challenges this reductionist view by highlighting the hard problem of consciousness, emphasizing that subjective experience cannot be fully explained by physical processes alone. The debate between Smart's physicalism and Chalmers' dualistic tendencies encapsulates a central tension in the philosophy of mind, whether consciousness can be entirely understood through material means or whether it requires a fundamentally different kind of explanation. Smart is identified as an identity theorist because he argues that mental states, including sensations, are nothing more than physical processes in the brain. His famous paper, Sensation and Brain Processes, presents a defense of the type identity theory, which claims that every type of mental state is identical to a type of physical state in the brain. Here is how Smart supports the idea and why he is associated with identity theory. Number 1, parsimony or Occam's razor. Occam's razor, as we had just about discussed a few moments before, is a principle that suggests we should prefer the simplest explanation that accounts for all the facts. Smart argues that postulating a separate, non-physical realm of mental states, as dualism does, is unnecessary and overtly complex. Instead, it's more straightforward to identify sensations with brain processes because it eliminates the need to explain how a non-physical mind interacts with a physical brain. Nominalism and language. Smart introduces the idea of topic-neutral descriptions to argue that sometimes about mental states can be rephrased in ways that do not commit to a specific metaphysical theory. For example, saying I am in pain could be rephrased as something is happening in me, that it is like what happens when I stub my toe, which could be interpreted as referring to a physical process. This supports the idea that talking about mental states is just another way of talking about brain processes. Scientific progress and physicalism, number 3. The point number 3 that Smart argues for sensations being brain processes are that we increasingly find that we were once thought to be mysterious, non-physical phenomena which can be explained in physical terms. Just as lightning was once thought to be a supernatural phenomena but is now understood as an electrical discharge, so too can sensations be understood as brain processes. He suggests that future scientific advances will continue to reveal that what we call sensations are simply brain states. Number 4, avoiding dualism. Smart is critical of dualism, the idea that the mind and body are separate substances. He argues that dualism faces insurmountable problems, particularly the issue of how a non-physical mind could interact with a physical brain. By identifying sensations with brain processes, Smart avoids these problems altogether, providing a more coherent and scientifically grounded explanation. 5. Theoretical identity. Smart likens the identification of sensations with brain processes to other scientific identities, such as the identification of water with H2O. Just as saying water and H2O refers to the same substance, even though they seem different at first glance, saying pain and C fiber activation are just different ways of referring to the same physical state. So this brings us to the very evolutionary question that why Smart is identified solely as an identity theorist. For this, we will have to again go back to the type identity theory. Smart is identified as an identity theorist because he advocates the type identity theory. This theory, as we had mentioned in our previous lecture, asserts that every type of mental state corresponds to a specific type of physical state in the brain. Physicalist approach. As an identity theorist, Smart is a staunch physicalist. He believes that everything about the mind can be explained in physical terms, especially in terms of brain processes. This commitment to physicalism is central to identity theory, which posits that mental states are not just correlated with brain states, but are actually identical to them. Rejection of dualism. Smart's work is a direct response to dualist theories that suggest the mind is something other than the brain. By arguing that sensations are brain processes, he aligns with the identity theory, which rejects dualism and supports a monistic view that the mind and body are not separate entities but are one and the same. Impact on philosophy of mind. Smart's articulation of identity theory has had a significant influence on philosophy of mind. His arguments helped to shift the focus away from dualism and towards a more scientifically grounded understanding of the mind as a physical entity, leading to his identification as one of the key proponents of identity theory. Smart, thus, is identified as an identity theorist because of his strong advocacy for the type identity theory, which equates mental states with brain processes. He supports this theory through arguments grounded in parsimony, scientific progress, and the rejection of dualism, proposing that sensations are nothing more than brain processes. His work is foundational in the development of physicalist theories of the mind. Smart was a highly influential philosopher in philosophy of mind and metaphysics, and his work, especially on the ongoing identity theory that we have been discussing, played an immensely significant role in shaping contemporary debates about the nature of consciousness and the relationship between the mind and brain. Now, let's explore his popularity, the figures he criticized, and those who criticized his work. Popularity of the Smartian type identity theory, influence in philosophy of mind. Smart's work, particularly his 1959 paper, Sensations and Brain Processes, was pivotal in the development of identity theory, a major theory in philosophy of mind. During the mid-20th century, this paper is often called as the foundational text in discussions of physicalism and the mind-body problem. He was a leading figure among the Australian materialists, a group of philosophers based in Australia who were known for their defense to physicalism and reductionism. This group included other notable philosophers like David Armstrong and Julian Pallas. 2. Academic recognition. Smart held prestigious academic positions throughout his career, including at the University of Adelaide and the ANU. His influence extended beyond philosophy of mind to areas such as ethics, metaphysics, and philosophy of science. He was widely respected for his clear and rigorous philosophical style, and his work is still studied and debated in philosophy courses around the world. Now, it is also interesting that we quickly see the philosophers that Smart criticized: dualists and non-physicalist theories. René Descartes. Although Descartes was long had deceased by the time Smart was writing, Smart's work can be seen as a direct challenge to Cartesian dualism, which posits that the mind and body are distinct substances. Smart criticizes this view for creating unnecessary metaphysical complexity. C.D. Broad. Another target was C.D. Broad, whose theory of emergentism suggested that mental properties are emergent properties of physical systems but cannot be reduced to them. Smart opposed this idea, arguing instead for a reductive approach where mental states are identical to physical states. R.M. Hare and philosophical behaviorism. Smart also criticized Raelian behaviorism associated with Ryle and Hare, who tried to reduce mental states to behavioral dispositions. While sharing behaviorism's rejection of dualism, Smart argued that behaviorism failed to account for the reality of mental states as physical processes. Hilary Putnam. Multiple realizability. Now, we would see from this segment the philosophers who criticized Smart. We were so far seeing the philosophers that Smart criticized. It is also important to see how did the identity theory crop up, what fate did it meet, who were the philosophers who had commented on it, some acknowledgement, some appreciation, some criticism. And with philosophy, as we understand, it is about critical debate, it is about being open-ended. We start with the philosophers who criticized J.J.J. Smart. The first and the foremost is Hilary Putnam. Multiple realizability. Putnam was a significant critic of Smart's identity theory. He introduced the argument from multiple realizability, which contends that the same mental state can be realized by different physical states in different organisms. For instance, pain in a human might be associated with C fiber activation, but in an octopus it might be realized by a completely different neural mechanisms. This suggests that mental states cannot be straightforwardly identified with specific brain states. The second philosopher that comes close to Putnam is Thomas Nagel, who criticized Smart vis-a-vis the subjective experience or qualia. Nagel criticized physicalist theories like Smart's by emphasizing the importance of subjective experience, famously explored in his essay What It Is Like to Be a Bat. Nagel argued that Smart's reductionist approach fails to account for the subjective first-person aspects of experience, which are not easily reducible to physical brain states. Third, Frank Jackson could be yet another philosopher who could be counted as one who criticized J.J.J. Smart. knowledge argument. Jackson developed the knowledge argument against physicalism, particularly through his famous thought experiment involving Mary, the color scientist. Jackson argued that if Mary, who knows all the physical facts about color vision, learns something new when she experiences color for the first time, then there must be non-physical facts about consciousness that Smart's identity theory cannot capture. Fourth, last but most importantly, David Chalmers. The hard problem of consciousness. Chalmers, as mentioned earlier, introduced the hard problem of consciousness, arguing that no physical theory, including Smart's identity theory, can explain why and how physical processes give rise to subjective experience or qualia. This critique is a part of a broader challenge to the notion of mental states can be fully explained in terms of brain processes. Smart was a leading figure in the 20th century philosophy, particularly known for advancing the identity theory and contributing to the broader debate about the mind-body problem. Smart criticized dualists like Descartes, emergentists like C.D. Broad, behaviorists like Ryle, arguing instead for a physicalist and reductionist understanding of the mind. His work faced significant criticisms from philosophers like Putnam, Nagel, Jackson, and Chalmers, who pointed out potential limitations of identity theory, particularly regarding multiple realizability, subjective experience, and the explanatory gap between physical processes and consciousness. Smart's contributions were both influential and controversial, sparking ongoing debates about the nature of the mind that continue to this day. Smart remains highly relevant today, especially in discussions within the philosophy of mind, metaphysics, and the philosophy of science. His work has had a lasting impact on these fields, and several aspects of his contributions continue to influence contemporary debates. Here is a look at why Smart is still relevant. Influence on physicalism and philosophy of mind. Foundational in physicalism. Smart's defense of the type identity theory is a cornerstone of physicalist approaches to the mind. Even though some aspects of his theory have been critiqued and modified, the idea that mental states have a physical basis in brain processes is widely accepted in neuroscience and cognitive science today. Reductionism debate. Smart's work continues to be a key reference point in debates about reductionism in the philosophy of mind. His arguments for reducing mental states to brain states are still discussed in the context of whether all aspects of the mind can be explained physically or whether some aspects like consciousness require non-physical explanations. Response to dualism. Smart's arguments against dualism are still relevant in contemporary discussions, especially as a dualist and non-reductive physicalist theories, like those proposed by Chalmers and others, continue to be debated. His work provides a strong foundation for those who argue that consciousness can eventually be fully understood through neuroscience. Qualia and subjective experience. While Smart's reductionist approach has been challenged by arguments about qualia, the subjective aspect of experience, his work remains central to understanding the limits and possibilities of explaining consciousness. The ongoing hard problem of consciousness still engages with the ideas Smart puts forth, making his work a crucial part of the debate. Ethical implication. Smart's work in ethics, particularly his defense of utilitarianism, continues to be influential. He is known for his clear and rigorous approach to ethical questions, and his arguments in favor of utilitarianism are still widely discussed. Philosophy of science. Smart's naturalistic approach to philosophical problems aligns with broader trends in the philosophy of science, where there is a strong emphasis on understanding human cognition, behavior, and experience through empirical research and scientific methods. His work supports the ongoing integration of philosophy with the findings of neuroscience and psychology. Educational influence, textbook and academic presence. Smart's work is frequently included in philosophy curricula, particularly in courses in philosophy of mind and metaphysics. His arguments are often used to introduce students to the identity theory and the broader debate about physicalism versus dualism. Intellectual legacy. Smart's contributions have inspired a generation of philosophers who have developed or responded to his ideas, ensuring that his intellectual legacy remains vibrant in contemporary philosophical discourse. Challenges and critiques. Engagement with critiques. The critiques of Smart's identity theory, such as the multiple realizability argument by Putnam, the knowledge argument by Jackson, and the hard problem of consciousness by Chalmers, have led to the development of new theories and refinements of physicalism. However, these critiques keep Smart's ideas in circulation as they continue to be a point of reference in ongoing philosophical discussions. To conclude, Smart remains relevant today due to his foundational contributions to physicalism, the philosophy of mind, and ethics. While some aspects of his theories have been challenged, his work continues to influence and shape contemporary debates, particularly in discussions about nature of consciousness, relationship between mind and body, and the reduction of mental states to physical processes. His intellectual legacy endures in both academic and educational contexts, making him a lasting figure in modern philosophy. So, with this, we have come to an end of our discussion on J.J.C. Smart, who has been our first thinker under the identity theory. With identity theory, we will slowly in our next class go to functionalism and see what are the discrepancies, what are the problems, what were the takeaways from the functionalist group. Identity theory and functionalism, thus, we have noticed in our entire 2 lectures, plays or gives a significant effect to the material mind. As such, the 2 lectures on identity theory and functionalism in the first lecture and the second one on J.J.C. Smart's identity theory talks about its effect or its correlation with the material mind. So, with this, we are closing towards the closure of the identity theory and functionalism, and we realize that philosophy is not it's an open-ended discussion. There is always a clear understanding, there is always a critical remark, there will always be ongoing debate, and as long as discussions are alive, our philosophical laboratories are alive. And precisely this is what our identity theorists, our functionalist theorist thinkers have been doing. Thank you all and see you in the next session.